Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So we have so much going on in the Parsha that we read this week. And it's packed, and it's loaded. And one of the things that I want to focus on, actually the thing I want to focus on, are the names. We have a Parsha full of names. These women, it's quite active what's going on with these women, and how they're having all these babies, but they are all having all these babies. There's 4 women, and they're all having all these babies. And those babies are being named, and they're being named by the matriarchs. They're being named by Leah and Rachel. And we want to look at those names because we're in the book of Genesis, and one of the things Genesis focuses on and teaches us is that names are essence. They're not simply labels of things. They actually will speak to the essence of the being. And when we look at how that works, it tells us the name will speak inward to the core, and then it will speak forward to the destiny. So names are not incidental things. We're very careful about the names. We name our babies in memory of people because we intend to bring the essence of that person to the baby. We want that essence to strengthen the baby, to bless the baby, to inform the life journey of the baby. We think very carefully about the names and who we will be naming in memory of. And in fact, there are certain people where we will not name our babies in their memory for the same reason. We don't want to create the connection that we know the name will begin to create. So we look at it and we want to look at what's going on with all the names in the Parsha. What are these women thinking when they're naming these babies these names? And it's not just the names of their children, because those children are going to grow up and be the tribes. So it's the names of the tribes that we're listening to, and ultimately those tribes are going to create the Jewish people. So we're looking at something that's going to track to the identity of peoplehood, to the identity of the Jewish people, and it's starting right here with these names. And we're not really happy about it, because we're looking carefully at those names, and it's actually a little shocking. When we look at what it is that the women are saying, the reason, the inspiration for these names, well, the first name is Reuven, which literally means, look, a child. It's beautiful. Except that's not what she says. She says, I'm naming him Reuven because God sees my pain. And now that becomes the essence of the name. And then it goes on from there to Shimon. And she says, Shimon, because God heard my affliction. Levi, the next one, is being named, and she says, because maybe now my husband will pay attention to me and accompany me somewhere. And we're reading this thinking, oh my goodness, are they aware what they're doing with those names? And we go on with the names. One of them is named Vindication. Another one is named My Struggle. And then we have Yisachar, who's named Rental. And we go on through this, and your head begins to spin. And when you're listening to it, and I've watched the English translations because the English translations don't want to translate it the way the Hebrew is saying. One of the names, Gad, the English translation says joyous. Oh, it's joyous. But when you look at it in Hebrew, there's a bait on there. It's not Gad, there's a bait on there, which means traitor. And you're honestly thinking, are they listening? Are they hearing what they're naming these children? And I can't imagine a day at the park with this family, where now they're going to call out and they're going to say, oh, God heard my pain. Go grab your brother. God saw my affliction, because we have to go home now. It's not private. When you name someone something, it's an announcement. The name precedes the person. And so the meaning of the name has already done the introduction. We already are waiting now for the person. That's actually what they've done. And then we look at the fact that they're all boys. We're all being given a list of boys. And when we look at it and say, well, wow, they must be really happy in the ancient world. Look at all these boys, except they're not. And the reason they're not is a Jewish reason. Every man has a commandment to be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply Jewishly means you have to have a son and you have to have a daughter. Because to be fruitful means I'm going to replace myself. So every man has to have a son. But multiply means I now have to put into the world the potential to grow beyond myself. That means a female. So every man in Judaism must have a son and a daughter, or he does not fulfill the commandment to be fruitful and multiply. So all these families that have 18 boys, 19 boys, 20 boys, it's lovely, it's a bracha, it's a simcha, but you didn't fulfill the commandment. You need a girl. So now we're looking at those names again, because suddenly in that long list, suddenly we're noticing, they're all boys. And we're also noticing the name Dan. Dan is the son of Bilhah. Bilhah is the handmaid of Rachel. Rachel hasn't had any babies yet. So she has a handmaid, Bilhah. Bilhah has a baby. Rachel names the baby. And Rachel names the baby Dan. Dan, we know lots of Dans. The word means judgment. And actually, she gives the meaning, and she says, you see, God judged me, and I'm okay. So I'm now going to name this baby that I'm okay with God's judgment. All right, maybe we're all right with that. Except years later, Leah also has children, continues having children, and lo and behold, we're told she has a girl. And finally, a girl appears, and now Jacob has fulfilled, be fruitful and multiply, and he did it through Leah. So what does she name the girl? Dinah, because it's a dig at her sister. And she says, judgment? Done? Here's Dinah. It's the same name. It's the female version. And Leah's now saying, God judged who favorably? I got the girl. And we're watching it, and we're listening to it, and we're thinking, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. No one is actually taking control of what is being put into the identities of this family, into the identity of the children. And even when we look at the birth of Joseph, the baby Rachel waited her whole life to have, Joseph. And she proclaims the name and says, Yosef, God should add another one. And you're thinking, oh, so now Joseph bears the name and the essence that he will never be good enough, that there needs to be another one, that he needs to add something. There has to be another. And then we watch how Joseph lives his life, because he will live it in another culture, and he will rule over another people, and he will take on another family, and he will embrace himself with another identity, just as he was named to do. And you wonder if these family understands what they're doing to those kids when they do what they're doing. They are parents who have planted their issues into the arena of their kids. Everything that's going on the adult level is competitive. It's not healthy. It's not good. One woman is the intended wife. The other woman is the wife that he was tricked into. The Torah tells us openly, one is loved and one is hated. This is a terrible family dynamic. And rather than resolve it, they put it into their kids. They named their kids. They took all the angst and started arguing with each other through the naming of the children. And they played it out in the kids' arena. No wonder these boys grow up to be who they are. They will be men of deceit. They will kidnap one of their brothers, planning to murder him, and will only compromise by saying, it's all right, we'll sell him into slavery. Listen, it's easier. We don't feel that we're inspired by these men, and they're going to give us the tribes, and the tribes are going to give us our national identity. So we have a problem that starts right here. And then the question immediately steps up to say, can it be resolved? Are we locked in? Is the Torah telling us it is what it is? It's a done deal. They named them. Deal with it. Are we ever locked in? And then we go back to the same sources that told us names are essence, and now they tell us something that opens the whole thing up. They say, look at the word name, because numerically, we're going to add up the letters to the word shame. And then we're going to notice, look at that. It's the same value as the word sefer, book. So now I can put an equal sign between them. The name equals a book. And we look at that and say, everyone's name, now we understand, is the title of the book they will write. It's the title. It is not locking in. It is informing. The book that everyone will write is their life's work, and it's titled with the name, because the name and the book are of equal value. Midrash tells us that everybody bears 3 names. The first one is the name the parents give. The second one is the name everybody else is going to give you. And the third one is the name you write for yourself. That is where we open it up. We are not locked in. When we look at these men, the sons of Jacob and Rachel and Leah and Zilpah and Bilhah, the biological parents of all of these men, we see that each of them wrote different books. We lump them together as the tribes, but those tribes were not identical to each other. They were each distinct. And each brother stood in front of Joseph later in Genesis with their own voice and distinctive voice. They wrote their own books. Some of them are going to redeem themselves. Some of them are not. Some of them are going to be the same. Some of them are going to get worse. We hear all about it in the book of Judges, where it openly tells us, look at the tribes, because they are distinct. What happens is that they settle in Israel, and where a group settles will now also begin to inform them, because Israel, as tiny a country as it is, we all know, has varying climate and varying terrain. So a tribe that's going to settle in the mountains is going to develop differently than a tribe that settles by the seashore. It's inevitable. And they're all going to continue to write different books that bear their names. Each of us inherit traits that speak of where we came from. And then we resolve our names as they become the titles of our books. It's the gathering of information so that we have the tools we need in order to write the distinctive voice that is ours. We know that we are influenced by everything. We're influenced by family. We're influenced by culture. We are influenced by climate. We are influenced by terrain. All of those things are going to speak into us, and they're going to speak to our name as well. The names given by parents connect us to the essence of someone. And often we know who we're named after. And if you ask someone, oh, were you named after someone, we can openly say, a great-grandmother, a great-grandfather, a great-aunt, a cousin. We know who we're named after. But do we know anything about them? Do we know what is the essence that was intended to carry over? Do we know what was dear to them? Do we know which value they held tight to? Do we know what Judaism spoke to them and which Judaism did not? Do we know about them? Because that's the exploration. That's what we need to do in order to have that name speak to us clearly where we can hear it and then actually be empowered by it. Are we locked into these things? Judaism never locks us into anything. Judaism tells us the greatest gift we have is free will. You cannot give us free will and then punish us for using it. We are never locked in. We are always making choices. And in this parsha, we're looking at choices that were made where we would question the judgment of it. Look what you named your children. But then the children are not locked in. They grow, they mature, they find their own voices. They write their own books. When we look at the names, we understand names are not labels. Names are potentials of history and opportunity that then intersect together. They merge, and what we end up with is we have a personal book that is each of us already named for us, and then we can fill in the book that is our life journey, which is exactly as it should be, because we should never forget that we're also known as the people of the book. Shabbat Shalom.